I'm going to go through an introduction and talk a little bit about the background behind the research that we're currently doing. I was asked to talk about the project we have funded by the National Pork Board. That project's about halfway through the data collection process. So Jason, having been able to analyze data last week, is way ahead of us. We'll talk about the research objective, the project description, the current status of the project, and what I see as the future direction. Briefly, I wanted to mention in 2009, there's 1 billion people worldwide that were estimated, according to the state of food insecurity, to be malnourished. And this is a big problem. We keep talking about economic efficiencies and these types of things, and obviously those are critically important to staying in business, but we also got to figure out how to feed all these people. The American pork producers have remained competitive in the global market despite higher labor and higher input costs through the adoption of new technology. And new methods are going to have to be devised if we are going to remain competitive that reduce inputs, minimize environmental impacts, provide for improved pig welfare, and ensure a safe and nutritious pork supply. And sow lifetime productivity is a component of these. So there's many factors that affect sow lifetime productivity, as you've heard described by the previous speakers. Gilt development, boar exposure, estrus detection, gestation housing, lactation feed intake, herd health, and many others. The impact of gilt pre-weaning management on sow lifetime productivity is one that I don't think we know much about, and we don't spend a lot of time thinking about it. When you ask folks about their gilt development program, not many of them tell you anything about what happened prior to weaning. But folks have been thinking about this for a little while. Donald in 1939 reported that the relative importance of sow and litter during the growth of suckling pigs was about equal. So folks have been trying to think about what's happening with the pre-weaning phase for a long time. He concluded that the dam and nurse dam influenced growth equally. So back here in 1939, he was cross-fostering pigs to try to understand how much of their performance was due to the genetics of their dam versus the environment that that dam was providing. So it's not necessarily a new topic that we're thinking about. Nelson and Robinson in 1976 used cross-fostering to create litters of 6 and 14, much like the project that Dr. Flowers described to you earlier. A big difference was, though, that they were weaning pigs at 8 weeks of age. So that's another big thing that's changed in a fairly short period of time as far as scientific research goes, is we've changed our management system. We don't wean pigs at 8 weeks anymore. They found that gilts from smaller litters were 4.5 pounds heavier than those from large litters at weaning. And Dr. Flowers alluded earlier to the advantages of that early growth in subsequent fertility. So they took those gilts that were either reared in litters of 6 or 14, and here's the number of gilts involved in each one of these replicates. The numbers are fairly modest. But as you can see over here are the differences in the subsequent litter size of those gilts at maturity. Now in 1976, or the early 70s, our litter sizes, as we all know, were quite a bit smaller than they are today. But you can still see that the gilts raised in the smaller litters had an advantage in the size of the litter they produced as a mature female. So this supports the results that Dr. Flowers reported. In 1981, Dr. Robinson, in a review paper, talked about the influence of maternal effects on the efficiency of selection. He concluded that gilts nursed in large litters grow slower, reach puberty later, and produce smaller litters themselves. He stated that these results suggest that maternal performance should be measured at 3 to 4 weeks of age. Well, at 3 weeks of age, we've weaned our gilts. We've weaned our pigs, so we're not going to be looking at maternal performance there. And prior to the initiation of creep feeding. Further, he suggested that early weaning may alleviate some of the negative association between the direct genetic and maternal components. So we have made improvements there. We wean our pigs earlier, and to a certain extent that has disassociated some of the negative association between the genetics and the maternal effects. Dr. Robinson and his co-workers went on to test this theory, and they did 9 generations of selection for increased litter size, with the caveat being that gilts were restricted to litters of no more than 10. Okay? So in the selection line, gilts could not be raised in litters greater than 10, and they saw a response to selection. Now, prior to this, direct selection for increased litter size had shown disappointing to optimistically variable results. But he was able to show that over time, here's our number born alive, he was able to increase the number of pigs in the line where gilts were raised in litters of less than 10. So the average number of born alive in the United States has increased by 10% from 1998 to 2008. So we're dealing with a different pig than we were dealing with in the 1970s or even the 1980s. Our pigs are weaned earlier. Our diets for both our pigs and our sows have improved, and we have new health challenges. And what I'm trying to point out here is that my earlier statement that we really don't know much about the pre-weaning effects on sow longevity, I believe are true partially because there hasn't been a lot of work done, but what work has been done, much of it was done some time ago, and things have changed a lot just in the last 15 years. So we set out to address this, and we wanted to look at the impact of the pre-weaning environment and management on sow lifetime productivity in modern swine production. And this project wasn't my idea. Actually, Matt Culbertson and William Herring, who were working for Smithfield Premium Genetics at the time, approached me and said, here's what we're thinking about doing. We'd like to work with you on this project. And then I got involved with the details after that. But the project actually came from a group at Smithfield approaching us. But prior to that, we had completed 2 projects in collaboration with Smithfield that were related to pre-weaning factors affecting pig performance. One of those is published in Livestock Science in 2010, and it had to do with the effect of piglet birth weight on survival and quality of a commercial market pig. Well, we're here to talk about sow longevity, so why am I talking about commercial market pigs? Well, I think many of the factors that influence the likelihood of a pig becoming a full value market hog may also influence the ability of a gilt to develop into a highly productive female. So in that study, one of the results was the probability of a pig becoming a full value market hog. Well, full value was identified as the pig survived to harvest, it weighed greater than 100 kilograms, and was free of injuries, belly ruptures, major health issues, etc. So basically, we had a good, solid market pig. If that pig's birth weight was 0.7 of a kilogram, so 1.5 pounds, there was only a 20% chance of that pig becoming a full value market hog. And as you can see, as the birth weight increases, the probability of it becoming that full value market pig increases as well. You know, Dr. Flowers was talking about some 3-pound pigs earlier, and he said he didn't consider those to be real large. Well, here's 3 pounds in here, roughly, and that doesn't even get us up to a 50% chance of becoming a full value market hog. Now, why is this important? Well, one of the recommendations out of this study was that these pigs down at this end of the scale probably should be humanely euthanized shortly after birth. Their probability of developing into a full value market hog is not very high. I would submit to you that one of the hypotheses from the research we're involved with right now is the probability of them becoming a productive female is not very high either. But that's one of the things we're here to test. We also looked at the effect of piglet birth weight on body weight, growth, back fat, longissimus dorsi area in commercial pigs. But the thing about this study that I found interesting was when we looked at average daily gain and pig birth weight and the interaction with whether the pig was cross-fostered or not. So cross-fostered pigs are on these dotted lines, and non-cross-fostered pigs are on the solid lines. And what we found was that the cross-fostered pigs had a disadvantage versus the non-cross-fostered pigs in average daily gain. Now, we decided to try to follow this up to see if we could validate that further. And so another study was designed where sows were either assigned to a treatment where cross-fostering was allowed, wasn't required, it was allowed, or a treatment where cross-fostering was not allowed. You can't cross-foster the pigs in that treatment regardless of the circumstances. So it's important to understand that in the treatment group where cross-fostering was allowed, about 70% of the litters were affected by cross-fostering, which means either a pig was cross-fostered in or it was cross-fostered out. The other 30%, there was no cross-fostering, but that's okay. That was the management system. Cross-fostering was allowed. What we found was no difference in weight at weaning. Number of pigs per litter. We found no differences at weaning. We found no difference in survival to nursery exit. And we looked at weights. We also found no difference. Now, you'll see a difference here for weight at birth or a tendency for difference. That's a spurious result because obviously the treatment was provided or applied after birth. So there was nothing about the treatment that affected the birth weight. But based on this, it did not appear that cross-fostering increased the weight of the pigs or the likelihood of them surviving to weaning. So this is a bit concerning when we think about it in terms of the benefits of cross-fostering and the concerns about cross-fostering relative to sow lifetime productivity. Is that cross-fostering we're doing on those multiplier farms helping those gilts, or is it detrimental to those gilts? And the answer is we really don't know. So I'll get on to describing the 10,000 gilt project as we fondly refer to it. The objective is to estimate the impact of pre-weaning environment and management on gilt subsequent sow lifetime productivity. There are two 1,200 sow units. These are multiplier farms within the Murphy-Brown system. After leaving the nursery, pigs will go to one of 4 gilt development units. And upon exiting the gilt development units, they will be sent to one of 10 commercial sow farms. These pigs are being born. We started back about the 1st of June, and we're hoping to finish up about the 1st of December. 13,000 gilts are going to be tagged. We bought 13,000 tags. I told the graduate students, when you run out of tags, you can come back to Raleigh. So this date is an estimate. They get to come home when they run out of tags and know they can't throw tags away. Both individual and litter birth weights will be recorded. Now, why do I emphasize litter and individual? Well, for the gilts, we're getting individual birth weights, but for their male litter mates, we're just getting a group weight. So we have a litter birth weight. We have individual gilt weights. We do not have individual birth weights on the males. Cross-fostering status will be documented. The sex ratio of the litter at birth, after cross-fostering, and after weaning will be recorded. And I know there was a question about that during Dr. Flowers' presentation, and I don't see that gentleman in the room. But we're collecting the data to try to address that question. And weaning weights will be taken 1 or 2 days prior to weaning. Now, I'll back up to this sex ratio issue again. Right now, I'm not aware of any real clear evidence that the sex ratio affects reproductive performance in female pigs. But Dr. John Vandenberg at NC State had published some work in mice where he showed that if a female mouse in utero was positioned between 2 male mice, she was exposed to androgens, which resulted in her being subfertile at maturity. I'm not aware that anybody's documented that effect in pigs. And we're clearly not going to go in and determine the exact position of every gilt or every pig in the uterus. But the thinking is that if a gilt, let's say you have a litter where there's 3 gilts and 10 boars, okay, you would suspect that those gilts may have been exposed to a different level of androgens than if the litter had 10 gilts and 3 boars. Now, I don't know whether any of that is valid in pigs, but we're going to take a look at it. We're not going to assume anyway at this time that it's not. Mortality will be documented through fourth parity. So we're measuring mortality in the farrowing house, in the nursery, in the finisher, and also we'll get feedback from the sow farms. And the way we're doing that is we've tagged all these gilts, and we're recovering all the tags so that we can document mortality. So if a pig dies, we get the tag back. Female performance will be documented on each farm. The data will be submitted to a centralized location. And we're defining sow lifetime productivity as pigs per female per day of herd life. Now, there are many different definitions of sow lifetime productivity, and I think we can look at sow lifetime productivity many different ways at the end of this project. But if you force me to pick a definition today, this is the one we're going to go with, because it encompasses not only the reproductive performance, but return to estrus, the farrowing interval, and a number of different things. So what's the current status? Well, we've tagged 8,213 gilts. Of those 8,213 gilts, 6,975 have reached weaning age. In other words, they could have been weaned. And 5,677 were actually weaned. So we've had a 19% loss in the farrowing house. Now, that loss includes pigs that were humanely culled shortly after birth, because based on the study earlier, if a pig's below a certain birth weight when they're born, they're removed. It also includes pigs that are called as being unthrifty prior to leaving to the nursery. Okay? So they're going through, they're identifying pigs that they don't think are healthy enough to go on to the nursery, and they're also being called. So there's a number of things involved in there other than just a pig dying of a natural cause. So there have been 1,298 gilts called in the farrowing house, or mortalities. There's 1,088 litters that have been weaned. So far, we've had 90 deaths in the nursery. And we've had about 2,623 gilts that have reached a point where they've left the nursery and moved on to the finishing, or the gilt development units. So here are our projections. At the end of the project, we expect to have about 2,000 litters involved, 13,000 gilts that have been tagged and birth weights recorded. Expect to wean about 10,500 of those 13,000 gilts. We expect 9,500 of them to make it through the nursery. We expect about 9,000 of those to be available for selection to go into the sow units. About 7,250 will probably actually be placed in sow units. I'm expecting about 6,000 of those 7,250 to produce a first litter. And I'm projecting that 2,000 of those will make it to the P4. And I don't know how those numbers exactly compare with the numbers Dr. Pullman presented earlier, but I don't think they're too far off. So what about the future direction? Well, obviously, as I just said, we're going to continue to collect the data and get the 13,000 gilts. We're going to monitor those mortalities from birth through the sow farm, and we're going to get all that sow farm performance recorded. These gilts come from single sire matings. Tail tissue has been retained on each gilt at birth as a potential source of DNA for further research. And pending the outcome of the initial experiment and the availability of funding, we intend to genotype some or all of the gilts to identify genomic regions associated with factors influencing cell lifetime productivity. Funding has been provided by the National Pork Board, and we are very appreciative. And obviously, Murphy Brown has a lot of investment in this project, as does Smithfield Premium Genetics, and of course, those of us at North Carolina State University and North Carolina Ag Research Service.